You know what 2 things I like? Men is not an acceptable answer to that question, by the way. I more than just like them. The actual answers were science and video games. One day I woke up and said to myself, why not both? I often treat my nerdy interests the same way I treat my responsibilities. I'm not very good at them, and I often do stupid things thinking I can handle it, when I can't. So anyway, last year I was working on this project, and I promise you that it's extremely serious, and a valuable use of my time. It's something that I think is essential for development in any budding young gentleman. It's a huge tier list. And what better topic to tier list than the one I'm most autistic for? A tier list with which I could get my many friends involved, so I didn't feel as if I was completely wasting my life. It didn't help. Naturally, I'm talking about a tier list of all Pokémon. This was the mission I gave myself in May of 2025, and by all, I mean it. Every single possible thing that could be assigned a label was sent to the tier list machine. And yes, I'm genuinely prideful of this idea now that it's completed. It took a lot of bloody work. Even though it's ultimately meaningless. But hey, you clicked on this video, you're probably also a neurospicy homosexual with a bit too much of an interest in arbitrarily ranking magical fictional creatures. That's right, I know what you are. Let's get started. Also, if you subscribe, I'll make a tier list of all 4 billion spenders. Promise. First things first, I need friends. Okay, it's not that bad, don't worry. Last time I tried something like this, my parents thought it was weird, so this time I'll need an audience to encourage my jobless behaviour. Luckily, I have just the thing. My friend Toblobs has a Discord server where all his loser friends hang out. Now ain't that convenient? I know they'll be watching this video, so thanks for the help guys, you were the ones to inflict this suffering upon me. And this Toblobs guy, he's the worst. Suckering up to me and asking to capitalise on the publicity this video brings him? Fine, there's a link to his channel and Discord server in the description. Swing on by if you want to see the results firsthand. Now I know why I'm investing so much time into this, we've come across a new problem. The how. Well, I exclaimed confidently. It's a tier list. I've done this before. How hard can it be? I decided to keep things simple. Step 1. Make a thread for Pokemon rankings to keep everything together. Step 2. Lay down the parameters. Re-rank all the Pokemon 3 at a time, because nobody has the patience to do over 1,000 of them in one go. Every day, I'd randomly pull the 3 posters from a Google wheel I made ages ago in case I ever needed it. I know, I'm so prepared, reserve your compliments. I'd send pictures of the Pokemon to this thread, and each participant would react to the image with the tier they'd give it. 0 guidance was given on how to rank the Pokemon. It could be any tier you wanted for any reason. I didn't want to stifle this project by imposing unnecessary restrictions, so I left the scores up to interpretation. Then, after roughly 24 hours had passed, I would average out the scores from the day before, slap those Pokemon on a tier list, and generate the next 3. All this would continue daily for about a year and a half until we were done and had ranked them all. Except it didn't take that long, because pretty early on we figured out that would take way too long, so we started doing 6 a day. Thank God for that, I'm already sick of it. It's actually pretty difficult to keep up daily events like this, believe it or not. I think I like Pokemon, but this experience has me questioning. I also had a few personal rules at the time that I mostly didn't end up sticking to for various reasons. The first is that anyone could vote. By the end, 9 members had cemented themselves as willing to vote every day, and I chose to just consider these 9. Since the sample size is small, not doing this would cause inconsistencies. Other people popped in from time to time, but after a while I just ignored them. Sorry. Secondly, I said I would not change a score once it had been decided. Obviously to save me having to check Pokemon multiple times, but this didn't end up mattering since our 9 participants were set in stone. Although in some ways I preferred the tier list before I made these changes, I think it is better overall after the fact. The other thing I needed to decide upon was which Pokemon to even include in such a ranking. Initially I went in with the approach of literally all Pokémon, but this proved infeasible once confronted with the realization that many Pokémon like Unknown, Alchemy, Vivillon, Silvally, and Arceus had dozens of forms that just weren't all that different from each other. And yes, Spinder included, which if I treated all as separate forms would make this project actually impossible within a human lifetime. It became clear almost immediately that I would have to draw the line somewhere. Initially, I decided to only rank forms that I felt made a significant enough impact to where the formers would realistically be placed in different tiers. For example, I felt that the gender difference between male and female Jellicent was significant enough, but not that of Hippowdon. And there sure as hell wasn't any way I was considering the two forms of Torchic to be different just because one has a butthole. For all the forms I excluded, I held a poll at the end to see if the majority disagreed with me and would rather rank the forms separately. This only applied to a handful. Overall, the tier list would be exclusive to any forms present in a playable Pokémon game developed by Game Freak. I made this definition up. This mainly just excludes certain anime Pokémon like the Pink Butterfree and Crystal Onyx, although also a few noticeable others such as Shadow Mewtwo and Lugia. This definition also has the unintended side effect of not classifying BSP as Pokémon games, which is pretty funny. You may disagree with this, which is fair, since it's not perfect, but I think it works. I've gone through the National Deck several times to make sure there's nothing I missed, but the question of what counts as a separate form is quite convoluted, and I inevitably think I missed some. At a certain point, I just had to call what qualified for the list to save myself the time and pain of splitting hairs. The playable part of the definition was only especially relevant before Legends ZA released, but we ended up doing the Gen 9 Megas at the end anyway. And with that, I had my full list of all rankable candidates, a grand total of 1,304 Pokémon. Yeah, this became impossible to do manually very quickly. I have no programming skills, which made this harder in a lot of ways, but at least I could streamline it if I had something to tell me everything I needed to know. Enter Excel, the hero of this story. I wanted to learn how to use it anyway, which was convenient at the time. And that went... my dad did most of it. I did get better towards the end, I think. Anyway, the spreadsheet I made had everything. All the Pokémon, their names, types, generations, score, rank, so on and so forth. It's beautiful, it's my beloved, and I would die for it. It ain't exactly pretty, but hey, I'm proud of it. It's basically just a database of the national decks, feel free to use at your leisure. It also came in handy with the analysis. Speaking of... What, you thought I'd just tell you right away? I know better than that. First, let's meet our participants. The first of our participants is the mighty Zen, who really deserves a second award. Out of all 9 of us, he was the only person to rank every Pokémon on the day they were posted, not having anything to catch up on by the end. Even I missed some days and had to do a few bonus rounds to catch up. But instead of giving him the honour of something actually impressive, I've highlighted Zen as our resident racist. There is a logic behind this, I promise. A Pokemon's generation was most likely to reflect Zen's score more than anyone else's, with over 1.5 tiers between his highest and lowest ranked generation. See what I mean? He judges Pokemon based on where they come from. Very racist. We already knew this about him, come on. But the prejudice doesn't end there, because Zen also had the largest range in his types. Almost. There's one outlier. Yet despite all this variation, Zen somehow miraculously is tied for the average score closest to the overall average. I have no idea how he is so widespread and yet so accurate at the same time. It's kinda scary, honestly. Looking at the data, it's clear where his preferences lie, with Ghost and Dragon types as well as Generation 6 Pokemon being far above the rest. On the flip side, normal and fighting Pokemon from Generation 9 were hard pressed to get above C tier. Although he had the second largest S tier category, Zen also has healthy E and F tiers, a reflection of how split his ranking is. I find it difficult to find much to comment on for Purple's ranking, beyond a few superstitions of my own. At first, I thought he was a huge fan of the colour blue, but it was just because he likes early gen water starters. For a while, Purple was the most generous of the contributors, with the highest average score, although eventually was dethroned in this title. And other than that, he doesn't stand out in too much regard. Purple is kinda in the middle for a lot of categories. So the award he gets fits his degree, since he was the only person with Steel as a favourite type. Noteworthy since Steel was a popular type amongst us all. The award also acknowledges Purple's preference for buildings and bridges. I guess the man has a type. That type, unfortunately, is not normal, which is his least favourite by a landslide. You will hear this a lot. Just behind that is Fairy, a bad mix for his hard design mentality. Don't ask me what it means, I'm just trying to justify the results. Alongside Steel, Dragons were a favourite. Generations 6 and 7 hit home for him especially, in contrast to the increasingly disappointing Generations 8 and 9. Here we have the only contributor with a username that comes from Pokémon itself. BL Tamazarashi derives itself from the Japanese name for Spheal, although you wouldn't know it from looking at the results. Ice and Water are among Blitz's lowest ranked types, despite their favourite Pokémon having both. Instead, it was Flying, and to no one's surprise, Ghost types that were the favourite here. A similar story is told for the generations. 4 and 6 are all-time classics, whereas 8 and 9 don't quite shine, not unlike what we've heard before. There is, of course, a glaring feature of Blitz's ranking that has been noticeable since the very start. They absolutely hate Pokémon. Well, okay, hate is a strong word, but Blitz has always had a strangely lower average than everyone else. This may not be apparent at first, given the relatively large size of their S tier, but this is balanced out by Blitz having the largest F tier by far. 124 Pokémon were deemed completely worthless. That's nearly 10% of the whole tier list. Do the Mario! One stat I was secretly tracking throughout this project was what I called the agreement rate. This was how often a contributor voted for the correct tier, the final tier the Pokémon ended up getting after all the results were collated. Another agreement rate I collected was who each contributor agreed with and disagreed with the most. That's the best friend award you've been seeing up until now. Well, not only did Luckybot have the highest agreement rate, with an accuracy of 55%, but many of us also agreed with him the most on placements. Either this means his opinions are good, or boring. Hey, I agreed with him, so he must be totally awesome. Either way, I've slapped the Normie title onto Lucky as a way of honouring his totally non-controversial nature. Well, aside from the fact that he was the only person to not put his favourite Pokémon in S tier. For some reason. And hey, wouldn't you know, Lucky preferred Ghost and Dragon types in Generations 6 and 7. Never heard that one before. At least he isn't as much of a Gen 9 hater as most everyone else, even if it was still his least favourite. As was typical, Normal was his least favourite type, although in a unique twist, it was tied for this title with Electric. I'm never gonna forgive myself for calling Average the freest thinker, but I had been planning this since the start, and it just so happened to be him. It's just another way of saying the opposite of Luckybot's ranking. Average agreed with the least people. He has unpopular opinions that are unpopular because they're bad. He has bad takes. Okay, that might be a little harsh. I certainly preferred his enormous S tier to Blitz's equally sized F tier, although I might be setting the bar too low. Average's tier list is also weird for other reasons. Although he had a high overall score, his distribution is all over the place. If not for his astronomically high score for the Ghost type, a score infinitely higher than anything else of his, Zen would have had the biggest type range. He's also the start of the Gen 1 club that everyone from here on out is a part of. Aside from Ghost, he also liked, say it with me, Dragon, 6, and 7.
Hello? What's that? What do you mean they hit the second tower?
Let me tell you a story. Amy only properly started the rankings about halfway through, which meant he had to catch up on a bunch. That gave me the privilege of paying extra close attention to all his scores. Yay. Not that it felt like it mattered whether I paid attention or not, because he gave everything the same damn score. Everything in B. No interesting opinions in sight. I hope he knew this was coming. Listen to me, Amy. I hate your opinions, and I hate you. You ruined my tier list, is what I would have said back then. But as I was going over the results, I thought of something. So, I organised Amy's and my own scores by tier, and then compared them side by side on some graphs. Here are those graphs. What's important to note is that everyone had a final result skewed towards the upper tiers. This should come as no surprise. The people doing the Pokemon polls generally have a like for Pokemon. But Amy had much more of his tier list weighted towards the middle, giving it this kind of bell curve shape. This is why his scores felt so different to my own. I was ranking in the shape of a Max or Boltzmann distribution. I even knew this would happen going in, so there's really no excuse as to how I didn't pick up on this sooner. Can't give Amy too much credit though, I still hate his opinions. Especially his disdain for the bug type, which an interesting choice of flying for a favourite does not make up for. In terms of generation, Amy's preferences are much more by the books, with 9 falling behind and 1 and 7 picking up the slack.
Life could be a dream, life could be a dream.
Oh, Toblobs, you are a mystery to me. He ranked a lot of these in a call with me, and I'll tell you that the vast majority of his decisions were either first impressions, or remembering he had a Pokemon card or something at one point. Naturally, this put his scores all over the place, to the point where I can't really deduce any significant pattern at all. At the very least, he would often put all members of an evolution line in the same tier. He has this system where related Pokemon will generally all score around the same, which I don't really understand, but to each their own. Toblobs thankfully had clear favourite types. Oh, allow me to correct myself. Type. Dragon is in the lead, and it's not close. On the other end is more of a battle though, with Rock and Bug very closely matched as the lowest. For Generation, the reverse is true. Gen 9 is far and away the bottom spot, whereas Generations 1, 4, 6 and 7 are all in contention for first place, competition like no one else has seen. I won't even attempt to explain this man's opinions further because I'm frankly not sure I could. Orion was easy. He likes Pokemon a lot. We had some reasonably high scores before Orion tagged along, but we had truly seen nothing. His average for most categories was almost half a tier higher than the rest of us, certifying him as by far the biggest Pokemon lover among us. I've given him the Full of Whimsy award because he's just so full of joy. Even the categories he ranked lower down were still higher than most people's higher tier categories. With that said, everybody has to have a best and a worst, and for Orion, those are Gen 1 Ghost types at the top and Gen 8 Fairy types at the bottom. Tangoth for a favourite Pokemon is certainly a choice, but I've played Pokopia now and that game is so good that you know what? I get it. It's weird, but I get it. And that's everyone. Oh, wait a minute. Me? Hard to say I was surprised by anything here. I knew what score I'd be giving 99% of Pokemon before I started, so this tier list looks completely normal to me. On occasion I'd stumble across one I thought I judged wrong, but I tended to amend those when I noticed them. As for what did well, unsurprising to everyone besides myself, Ghost was the number 1 type. I did not think Ghost would be my favourite, but it makes sense in retrospect, since I would call very few Ghost types bad. That tended to be what made a type popular, consistency rather than a mix of quality. The types I had expected to be my favourites were Bug and Fairy, which ranked 2nd and 3rd respectively. Even though I'd say I'd prefer these to Ghost, they definitely have more Pokemon that I don't like, which is why I think they didn't do as well. The generations, however, were much more what I expected. Generation 5 was the worst, which may come as a surprise to some, but were my honest thoughts going in. Unova has some killer Pokemon, but it is overwhelmed by the huge amount of garbage present. Generation 1 and 9 are also mixed bags, although with a few more personal favourites of mine. 7 is undebatably the best, with very little standing out as poor, closely followed by 6, which doesn't quite achieve the same heights, but is small and consistent. I've got to admit that the award I've given myself is a lie, almost. For the longest time while doing this, my average score was the same as the overall average. And I mean exactly the same, down to the decimal. This changed right about the final 20 days or so, with my score going up for a reason I cannot figure out because I don't like a lot of the new megas. But for a long time, I was the most average, even more so than average. That sentence doesn't make sense. With that said, the average isn't really an accurate reflection of my opinions, since I think I like a lot of weird Pokemon. Chatot, Cryogonal, Durant, Spupa, Cofagrigus. Regardless, it's hard to be the judge of my own opinions, so I'll let you decide. And now that's everyone. Up next is the categories. Beginning with type, it should come as no surprise that Ghost was the favourite by far. No one disliked it, and many had it a tier above the next highest type. In our case, that runner-up was Dragon, closely followed by Steel. These are not an unreasonable top 3, and was essentially what I would have predicted. Below that, most types fall into a comfortable range, although certain types like Fire, Dark, and Ground are all slightly preferred. At the very bottom were Ice and Electric, and least of all, Normal, which was the only type to not be ranked in the B tier. It was only 0.01 points away, so it's not like the difference between it and Ghost type is actually that much. The same cannot be said about Generations, however. The elephant in the room is how badly Generation 9 did. Although not unexpected, I would not say it's a fair assessment. Regardless, even I must admit that Generation 9 is certainly held back by many contentious Paradox forms, 8 different Ogerpon forms, 4 Squawkabillies, and the lowest ranked Legendary Trio by a light year. As much as I like some of these, there are definitely equal amounts of stinkers that had Generation 9 at the bottom of most people's lists. The opposite end of the stick is a much tighter race. Gen 6, 1, and 7 are all contenders for the top spot, although Generation 6 did manage to take home the trophy. I think this supports my idea that being small and consistent is better for a category than large and inconsistent, even if it doesn't achieve the same heights. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that the winning type and generation are some of the smallest among their competitors. People are going to be naturally less divided on them if there's less to consider. All the other generations were fairly consistent with each other, although 8 did stumble a little. Here's something fun. I wanted to see what else influenced the results, so I kept track of some other stats along the way. One of those was exactly that. Stats. Did stat total affect how a Pokemon scored? Were stronger Pokemon more likely to be put higher up? Well, the answer is interesting. Here's what the results say. I'm not even sure if every Pokemon is plotted on here because there's so many. I don't think they are, but this doesn't change the trend. You'll immediately notice that there appears to be a slight upward trend, indicating what I hypothesize is true. Stronger Pokemon do perform better. But if you take a closer look at that trend line, it begins to fall apart. If you don't know what R² means, it's called the correlation coefficient. It describes how accurate a correlation is. An R² value of 0 means no correlation at all, whilst 1 is a perfect correlation, and as you can see, for this graph, it is not that great. If I could translate the R² of 0.03 into words, it would be, there is only a trend if you trick yourself into thinking there's one. This data tells us that it's basically impossible to predict Pokemon's score based on BST alone. And it makes sense, you can clearly see that there's a lot of spread over the whole graph. It's essentially just a big tumour of data points. Here's an interesting one. I was concerned that doing this tier list over a long period of time would impact the results. Now, I can't say for sure that this wasn't the case. It's possible that people changed the way they ranked things and these effects cancelled each other out. But what I can say is that overall, we were extremely consistent. The R² for this graph is even lower than the previous one, and the slope is essentially non-existent. In fact, to 2 decimal places, which is the accuracy of the data this graph is using, the slope is exactly 0, suggesting that the day a Pokemon was ranked had no effect on its placement. Except, pragmatically, this isn't actually true, and I know this from experience. I'll give an example. I ranked Barbaracle at D tier, but this was before Legends ZA came out. When that game released, Barbaracle got a Mega I liked quite a lot, and I used one on my playthrough team. So now I'd rank it a B. Now, I'm not saying that this would change the final results dramatically, or even at all, but it would change how the tier list looked in some ways, even if the overall effect on the categories we were observing would be the same. It's just interesting to think that Game Freak releasing new content as this tier list was being made may have influenced the results in some way. Lastly, I have some additional categories I made up, just because I thought it'd be fun. Some Pokemon had a wide range of scores, with some people giving them F tier and others giving them S tier. These are the most disagreed Pokemon, which consisted of a group of 33, which are Lokic, Slowpoke, Galarian Weezing, Flapple, the Dunsparce 3 segment, Meowscarada, Drampa, Sinistcha, Gulpin, Wishy-Washy Solo, the Dunsparce 2 segment, Mega Slowpoke, Skiddy, Vibrava, Goldingo, Lickitung, Hisui, Gunslinger, Wobble, Licky, Landorus, Therian, Mega Cameron, Crabominal, Tarantula, Raging Bolt, Sunken, Trudel, Mudsdale, Gafire, Pulmona, Ironhands, Whismur, Rapska, Charizard. And on the flip side were the Pokemon which were the most unanimous and got the same scores from all 9 rankees. Galarian Moltres, Trico, Litten, Houndour, Roselia, Gabite, Venomoth, Mega Heracross, Petalil, Deerling Summer, and Arboliva. In a similar vein, we have the best worst and worst best categories. What's that, you ask? The best worst Pokemon was Drizzile, which Amy gave S tier despite its abysmal ranking overall. And the worst best was Lokex, which Blitz delegated to the F tier despite how cool it is. These were the lowest ranked Pokemon that anyone gave S, and the highest ranked that got F. To cap things off, I have a couple of subjective categories. The biggest underdog was the Pokemon that I didn't expect to perform well that did very well, which has to go to Blacephalon. It's extremely weird, yet this goofy bomb-headed clown managed to be just one of 22 Pokemon in S tier. Unfortunately, not everyone had the same treatment, and this definitely applies to the biggest disappointment. No doubt that title belongs to the entire Chikorita line, who all did very badly considering they were among Pokemon's earliest starter icons. Alright, that's enough of my analysis. You want to see the meat of the tier list, don't you? The top and the bottom? Who did best and who's the absolute worst? I'll stop teasing you. Let's begin with our bottom 10, the 10 Pokemon who absolutely should never have been made. Number 10 is shared by two bug types, Volbeat and Blipbug. Weak, unremarkable, and just plain ugly, it's no wonder these two critters of a generally unpopular type didn't do well. Volbeat had greater heights than Blipbug, I gave it B tier, but it also had lower lows to balance out this tie. Number 9 is Frigibax. I couldn't tell you why this is considered among the worst Pokemon of all time, but I suppose it's a totally unremarkable and pathetic creature belonging to a generally disappointing pseudo-legendary line. It's definitely not doing any favours for the Ice type being among the E tiers. Closely behind at number 8 is Oinkologne Male. This I understand completely, it's hideous. Even if the female version was boring, it at least scored higher for not being offensively ugly. Not to suggest that the male version isn't also boring. Number 6 becomes number 7. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. Because we have a tie. Between Quilladin and Enamorous Incarnate. The latter I consider one of the worst abominations to grace this earth, and frankly 6th worst is generous. Quilladin I don't hate as much, but it is renowned as the epitome of awkward middle stage starter Pokemon, so I can understand it. Barely escaping F tier at number 5 is Munkidori. The Loyal 3 overall performed horrendously, and would you believe me if I told you that Munkidori isn't even the lowest one? In fact, you probably would believe me. Its only saving grace is that a few people considered it merely unremarkable, rather than downright atrocious. Another tie takes us into our top 3. Hailing from Kanto, Jinx and Mega Starmie represent the failures of both old and new. It seems they have not learned from their mistakes. Number 2 cracks into the F tier with Enamorous Therian. Extremely poor showing from Pokemon number 905 in general. An ugly turtle monster was probably not how to remedy a slightly insulting and slightly sexist genie. And the number 1 worst Pokemon, so far below the bottom of the barrel that frankly it would be grateful to just be in the barrel at all. I've already alluded to it, say it with me. Okie dokie. At one point this had a score of exactly 0, although Orion, in his infinite generosity, raised it to 0.22. Isn't that awesome? It was so bad that we even had a sacred Z tier category reserved for it, and only it. Truly a Pokemon of all time. But we aren't here for the sucky ones. Let's talk about the reason we actually play Pokemon. The good stuff. Competition up here is a lot tougher, so we'll do the top 50 rather than the top 10. 43rd to 66th, no I'm not joking, is a tie. So give your congrats to Magikarp, Zygarde Core, Mega Charizard Y, Blastoise, Alolan Ninetales, Mega Gengar, Mew, Quagsire, Scizor, Horo, Celebi, Slacking, Spiritomb, Lucario, Hisuian Zorua, Charjabug, Necrozma Dawn Wings, Necrozma Duskmane, Alolan Vulpix, Mega Blaziken, Froakie, Goodra, and Solgaleo. Well done to them for a strong A tier placement that earned them all consideration as one of the greatest Pokemon of all time. The ties don't stop there either, as the next 13 up to 30th are all neck and neck. Darkrai, Eevee, Rotom, Regigigas, Aegislash Shield, Corviknight, Wooper, Swampert, Primal Kyogre, Mega Rayquaza, Dialga, Shaman Land, and Hydra. At joint 23rd, Gible, Gliscor, Haxorus, Mimikyu, Kingambit, Sceptile, and Giratina origin. Joint 14th, Spheal, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Chandelure, Necrozma, Blacephalon, Ceruledge, Gyarados, and Snorlax. And now we reach the top 5, which is way more than 5 Pokemon because of our small sample size, meaning that many Pokemon got the same score, but still, Gengar, Tyranitar, Lapras, Mudkip, Groudon, Deoxys, Infernape, Greninja, and Ash Greninja. They all earn this honour. At last, we have the number 1 spot. 4 Pokemon were graced with this title, earning, in our hearts, the prestige of being the best Pokemon ever made. And honestly, it should come as no surprise that Metagross and Garchomp are among our champions. They're powerful, they look the part, and they've remained iconic ever since their debut. But what you might not expect is that a more recent hero has emerged. One from the last 3 generations of Pokemon, who has so quickly become a favourite that not just one, but 2 members of its evolution line are fighting for the number 1 spot. I of course refer to none other than Decidueye and Rowlet, the starter Pokemon so impeccable in design that both had to be up here. Just one would not suffice. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you your 2025 Pokemon Champions. Oh wait, there's something else. Just a little side note, there was a point where Spheal was ranked higher than any of these guys. As in, much higher, it had a perfect score. This didn't last as more people joined, but it must feel good for Blitz to know that Spheal was at one point unanimously considered to be complete perfection. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? What? Why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you're not satisfied. You dare suggest that I've missed something? That we can't possibly be done with 20 minutes of this video remaining? Alright, you got me. There is one more thing. Enjoy the montage. thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. This project literally took me hundreds of hours to make, including taking the results every day for half a year, making the spreadsheet to collect and analyze all the data, writing the scripts and editing the video, and spending a long amount of time in Discord calls going over Pokemon that people missed for whatever reason. I doubt I'll ever do something on this caliber again, so it better have been worth it. As I said, there's a link in the description to the Discord server we did this in, so come on by if you want to see that, although it's not unmoderated, so behave. There's also links to Toblob's YouTube channel and the completed spreadsheet if you want to look at the data in greater detail, or just repurpose it for your own use. Please do subscribe as well if you want. I do have more projects in the works. As I said, nothing on this scale, but still some pretty big stuff that requires a lot of work. It's Pokemon's 30th anniversary this year, as well as my 10th anniversary of playing Pokemon, so I want to do something for that. That's future stuff though. For now, I need a break. I'll see you next time.